we see a variety of things, a variety of columns that it's pulling from. It was pulling from average percent total processor time, total max, min, and average for different columns inside of the Windows table. Well, the first thing we know we need to do is change the table name to our processor table for KR2, which we're going to change here, and we'll leave the view HV. So we'll do KR2, as we know before, is the name of the agent product code, and processor is the name of the table that we need. And now we're looking at HV. So we need to look at the schema ITM user and filter based off that view. So now it shows us all the columns that it returns in the database. So now we need to rename these columns to be the proper names. So we look for total processor time, average total processor time. We see a lot of averages, but here's processor time, average percent processor time. Now, you can simply, as I'll show here, you can simply double click on one of these and it'll put the full name of the database table in there for you automatically, but this won't work because for some reason DB2 needs quotations around each text after the dots. And by the way, you don't need to put the full name. We're already filtering based on ITM user, and we're already filtering based on our processor table by using this from statement. So all we really need is this. And since we have most of it there, the only thing we need to change is instead of the percent sign, we change it to PCT, and we get rid of the total. That's what I'll do here. So we'll just do PCT, and I'll copy that so I don't have to keep doing it over and over again. And for max, it's going to be the same, and max percent processor time, min percent, so they're the same. So make the same modification there and there, and we look for privilege time, and we see it's the same. We get rid of the total and change the percent sign to percent. And if we look for user time, average user time is the same. We get rid of it the same way. And then if we look, we try and look for context switches. We don't find it. That's because it's not in this table. It's in a different table. Now, you could easily just select it from another table if you wanted to and modify this query and put that in the graph, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to eliminate and make it easy on us. Then we're looking for interrupts per second, average interrupts per second. We get rid of total, get rid of the word total, and we see instead of a slash second, we do underscore and a lowercase s per second. Remember, case does matter here. And then we know server name changes to node name as we see here. So we change this to node. The rest of it's all the same. It's the default columns that every table has: right time, shift period, vacation period. I would recommend leaving the output column names the same because that's what the graph in the report will key off of for the legend, for creating the legend. So if we look at output columns, there they are, and we also have some computed columns for changing the name, the way the date's formatted, computing averages and standard deviations, and that's what that's for. And then we have a parameters tab here, which we see 3 parameters being inputted into the query. One is the server name, which we've already modified, and then shift period and vacation period. So if we look at our query here, we see here a question mark for the node, which will be taking in as param1 because it's the first question mark listed, and shift period, which is the second question mark, and vacation period. So that's where the parameters get inputted, and it's in order. So param1 is the first one, server name, and make sure they're reflected correctly, and they should be by default. So if you don't have those things defined as defaults, then the preview results button won't work. It won't return any results. But so far we made changes, we click OK, and we save the changes we've made. So how do we preview, make sure that actually pulls the correct data? we go to report parameters, and we define those 3 parameters so that that query will work. Otherwise, the question mark will remain empty. So we have to first select our OS type and default, and we're going to select, of course, our Windows Remote because that's what we're testing. And in our server name, we're going to select our Windows Remote server name. Click OK. Now the other parameters, which were shift period and vacation period, also already have default values, so we don't need to change those. So now if we go back to our CPU Windows Remote and we preview results, we should get back results. But what happened? We didn't. Well, that's because we have to click OK and save the changes. Okay. So now that we have our CPU Windows Remote data set, we need to have a graph for our data set to display the data into, right? Or a table, however you want. But we're going to key off of what's already in the report. So if we maximize under the Layout tab, make sure you're in the Layout tab, and we maximize our layout, we have a few things here. We have a table at the top which shows the start and end date that you selected, report period, and OS type. And this OS type, just to let you know how this one works, these are column bindings, they're called. We can change the data column, and we see it's given a column binding of OS type, and that can be named whatever you want. It's just called OS type. And we click the edit button and look at the expression here. We see it's going to return a result. If you selected OS type of Windows, it's going to get NLS, which is a function, to go to a particular file in the report and pull back the property or the variable OS type Windows value, and so on and so forth. So how do we know what this OS type Windows value, Linux value, and Unix value are, and what's actually going to be displayed in the report? Well, that get NLS is actually going to be referring to, and we minimize this again, is actually going to be referring to our properties file, which is under our properties folder, ITM properties. If we open that up and we search for OS type Windows here, we see the value of it is uppercase Windows, which is what we want to show in the report. Now, there's a couple ways of doing this. You can do it the way it's done it here, which I'm going to recommend you leave alone because there's no need to change it. But there's also a way to do it inside of the data set itself, which we're going to have to do for our server name. Data column binding here. So if we look at this guy, we see here its expression is param server name. So he's going to return the result of what you've selected as a parameter. Now that's going to be the value. There's no way in BERT to say, hey, I don't want the value, I want .label. I wish you could do it, because if you could, then you wouldn't need to go the route I'm going to show you. There's a few different ways. We can just modify it here again by changing, we know it's a string, so we can do .replace like we did before, and do the modification here. But I don't like doing it that way, because then you have more than one place you need to maintain the display text in. You have to go into each different chart if there's more than one, and go and change them if you want to change the way it views. Rather, I recommend you put a modification in the data set like we've done earlier. So how do we change it in our data set? So we know it's going to be our resource data set because that has our resource value and labels in it. Now, I'm going to let you know inside of this report, because we're only selecting one server name, as you see here, there's not multiple server names that we can select. This resource value and resource label will only return one result. As we see in the preview results, we see our resource value will show, it will show by default all the resources available from the database, and the resource label, which would be all the host names for each one individually. In this case, I only have one, so it's kind of hard to explain, but if you had multiple ones, you'd see them all here. But we still